Just over 30 minutes for the Finance Minister to rise in Parliament and table Budget 2023. We've, of course, coming to you live here from the Confederation of Indian Industry. Tarun Bajaj, our budget editor, here with me. Sanjiv Bajaj, another Bajaj here in the studio, the president of CII, and our bucket man, Vinayak Chatterjee, who I'm sure has a list of numbers that he's going to throw our way. But Tarun Bajaj, let me start by asking you about the big expectation. Is this going to be the budget that bites the bullet as far as capital gains tax is concerned? Will we see that overhaul, clean-up, parity coming in for listed, unlisted, and so on and so forth? Many startups, Kunal Behel tweeting, saying that if there is parity brought in between listed and unlisted, there could be a Cambrian explosion of domestic capital. Do you believe the budget is likely to deliver on that promise?
I would again say that I won't like to speculate what the FM is going to do in a half an hour's time. So let's wait for an hour to see.
No, but is there a case for an overhaul at this point in time? And do you believe that enough work has gone in for that overhaul?
I think there is a case for overhauling the capital tax regime in the country. Having said that, I think it needs a much greater and deeper conversation with the stakeholders. Because as you can see in the conversations that you are having with experts, each of them is coming out with his point of view. So there's another point of view, which is the revenue neutral aspect which is there. For example, I'll tell you, for property you have 24 months, for debt mutual funds you have 36 months. Now once you change it, you can take property to 36 months, you can bring that. So whenever you do that, there'll be some noise in the market. So I think it'll be important for this aspect to be discussed. What I'll suggest is that if she does it, it's great. If it doesn't come in the budget, I'll request people like you to actually keep debating it in the next few months so that there is some crystallization as to what should be done.
Okay, well, we will know all whether the Finance Minister does something, does a complete overhaul or does something piecemeal, but you believe that a piecemeal approach is unlikely?
I would say piecemeal approach is unlikely for this government, the way this government has actually been doing things, and piecemeal will not be good also in the sense that only one aspect you touch, you don't touch the other aspects. So I think a wholesale cleanup would be the best thing.
Wholesale cleanup will be the best thing. Sanjiv Bajaj, 30 minutes to go for the Finance Minister to deliver. You know, there's lots of wish lists and...
गरीब लोगों या
This is where we have now balanced growth with fiscal prudence. Countries around the world have had to spend a lot of money to save lives and livelihood over the last few years. And we believe that their focus on growth through continued large public sector capex spending, whether it is to create more jobs, whether it is to spur consumption, are all important to do. And to be able to do that, the government has to augment its resources. And that's where we think that a strong private divestment program should go on. We need to widen our tax base. Capital gains tax getting rationalized is one of those things, but do whatever it takes. Decriminalize a whole bunch of business laws, make life easier to do business, because this is our decade for growth.
You know, you brought up the issue of disinvestment and asset monetization as well. And Mr. Bajaj, let me just bring up what the survey said, that, you know, if you use the proceeds from asset monetization to pare down debt, that will perhaps be the biggest fiscal stimulus that you can provide to the economy. But on that front, even for this year, we're still short 34,000 crores as far as the disinvestment target is concerned, with 3 months to go. You know, do you believe that this is going to be a challenging number, a challenging target for the government to work with, even in this budget?
So I think last year the budget was about 65,000 crores. So if you look at the overall budget size, which is close to now 40 lakh crores, 60,000 crore is significant, but not that significant that it should make a difference in the progress of the government towards growth. So I think in the last year, just before the elections, we may not see a very large number of disinvestment. But I think all of us now understand that disinvestment in this country is a very complex process. It has to be treated very carefully. And the government has actually been doing that. For example, Air India, LIC, these were big things. We hope IDBI will be done, Concor will be done. So I think there are movements that are happening, and I think after the elections we might see a greater force on this aspect.
So for this year, you believe that largely to be in line with what the previous estimate was, which was 65,000 crores?
I would say that it will be closer to that. We won't see any ambition of a lakh and 50,000 crores, but you can never say with this government.
Well, yes, that caveat is well taken. But Vinayak Chatterjee, are you ready with your buckets for us? What is seven buckets? Yeah, go ahead.
You've been pulling my leg on this one, but I'll rise. The bucket shall rise to the occasion.
The bucket challenge.
Okay. See, the first big expectation is that this government has been pretty consistent year after year in using infrastructure outlays as the pump primer of economic growth, and I don't think that has changed. If at all, that belief is reinforced looking at the current economic scenario. Last year, the total outlay for infrastructure was 7.5 lakh crores, which was a 35% increase over the previous year. This year, one is expecting a 33% increase, taking the figure to a nice round figure of 10 lakh crores. So 7.5 to 10 lakh crores. The next big expectation is, shall we say, the worrying state of urban infrastructure and urban financing. Two seminal reports have come out, the RBI report and the World Bank report, pointing to serious, shall we say, issues on funding India's growth centers, which are the urban centers. So one is expecting from the infrastructure sector a package that would facilitate the quick, shall we say, growth of municipal bonds as a capital market instrument.
Okay.
Third is the fact that this year, the latest data shows that while central government expenditure on infra has been pro rata level, on track, the state's expenditure has been quite disappointing for reasons of the states being fiscally stressed. So one is, last year the budget had about a 1 lakh crore for state support. I think we are expecting some tweaking of that, some kind of a state's incentive package, guessing that like a credit card payback, if a state finishes a project on time, then you get 10% back for the next project. Kind of an incentive is being expected. The fourth is very important. Time and time again, the Prime Minister and the Finance Minister has harped on the fact that outlays have to be increased for health and education. So I think it's a big expectation in this budget, recognizing the fact that the budget can't handle the humongous needs of health and education expectations of Aam Aadmi. A PPP framework is going to be announced to leverage institutional and private capital on the top of government expenditure for health and education. So I'm going to watch out for that. The fifth is a complete package for climate change, climate adaptation, and fostering green energy. So it could include a package for concessional lines of finance, as well as PLIs for electrolyzers, etc. So a package for green climate change. Sixth point is about, it's not strictly a budget issue, but one is expecting some kind of a policy pronouncement on the 28% GST in cement. Now, cement is very largely an Aam Aadmi commodity, as well as a very strong cost input for government expenditure also in infrastructure. 28% of GST is, seriously, most observers will say, is undeserving. It has revenue implications, as Tarun, we've had a discussion last year when he was at the helm. There are revenue implications, but with revenue buoyancy in GST and the push for Aam Aadmi and infra, we are expecting that some kind of a policy pronouncement will be made by the FM that the matter will be referred to the GST Council. Okay. My last point is on the railway budget. After the demise of the day-long railway deliberations, year after year we have found the deliberations on the railway budget get leaner and leaner, whereas concerns rise on the true nature of the operating ratio, because there are accounting stuff that happens there. And also there are huge outlay expectations on the railways, not just these 400 new Vande Bharat trains, dedicated freight corridor, bullet train, electrification. There's a huge expectation of a complete revival of Indian railways. So a little more debate, deliberation and transparency in the railway budget is also being expected. That completes my 7 buckets.
That completes your 7 buckets for today, Vinayak Chatterjee. Thank you very much for bringing that up. And on that note, let me bring Mr. Bajaj into what we heard there specifically as far as incentivizing state capex is concerned. Do you believe that there is a case to be made for more support at this point in time, some sort of an incentive scheme, as Vinayak was pointing out?
So I'll elaborate on what Vinayak just said. So last year the government gave 1 lakh crores to the states. A year before that it was just 15,000 crores, and last year 1 lakh crores was a very pragmatic step, because the states were constrained on account of fiscal constraints on their part, so it helped them. In the coming financial year, we expect that the state's finances will be far better. The states can actually spend money on their own on the capex, so that should be incentivized. And the best way to incentivize that is through a scheme as to what Vinayak is just mentioning. So that will help in the states actually putting in their own money into capital expenditure, and also the center incentivizing states.
So you agree with him that there needs to be an incentive scheme?
There needs to be an incentive scheme, but at the end of the day, at some point of time, the states have to take care of their capital expenditure. So the center cannot continuously contribute to the states in terms of capex.
Okay, so that's something to watch out for. The other bucket that Vinayak talked about, and that's something that I want to link back to the survey as well. The survey said that the private sector must be a co-partner in the government's development programs or in the country's development. To Vinayak's point about a PPP framework for health and education specifically, do you believe that there is again a case to be made for that, and what could that look like?
I'm not too sure. I think Vinayak can elaborate on what he thinks about it. But I would say that we actually have given a lot of hype to the budget in this sense also. Because if there's a PPP project that needs to come in health or education, it can come any point of time. So this particular budget actually gives outlays. And I think everybody looks at outlays as something which is government giving importance to that. But it's very important as to what those outlays are being spent for. So the same outlay can actually be spent in a certain way and a certain other way. So I think what his point is very right, that everybody is asking the government that you spend 6% of GDP on education, 6% of GDP on health, while the tax to GDP ratio itself is around the same figure. Yeah. So it's not possible. So you have to get the private sector. The point is well taken. How do you do that? I think she could give a hint if Ministry of Health and Education have actually participated in the budget process and given their views. Right. But it makes sense that we have to get the private sector into these very important areas as well.
Sanjiv Bajaj, the big expectation is that this could be the budget that takes forward the India plus story. From that point of view, what's the expectation? What do you hope the budget will deliver on?
We're clearly hoping that the budget identifies a few more sectors on PLI, especially sectors that have large employment, like tourism, it could be gaming, it could be filming, so that we not only create those many more jobs, which in itself creates a virtuous cycle for demand, but we create greater export opportunities as well. So that's one key ask. The second is just overall to continue with progress on ease of doing business and also reduce the cost of doing business. Because if you're going to get in more investment, then we have to ensure that we stay competitive, not just within our factory gates, but all the way out till the product goes out. So overall, continue with an atmosphere that ends up supporting new investment, encouraging current investment, and creating a few more sectors to help us leverage those opportunities.
Tarun Bajaj, before I toss it back to our colleagues in Bombay, the Prime Minister coming out yesterday, addressing the media in Parliament and saying that this is going to be a budget the world is going to be watching very closely for hope and optimism in these times of uncertainty and volatility. What do you take away from that?
I'll take you back on the 21 budget, where all of you before the budget had put a lot of pressure on us saying once in a century budget. And I think after the budget was delivered, you never asked that question, or nobody raised that point. So I'm sure it'll be the same thing this time as well.
Okay, well, we will see what finally gets delivered in less than 30 minutes from now. It is 10:34. The Finance Minister will rise to table the budget at 11. Markets are in fine fettle. Sanjiv Bajaj, Vinayak, Chatterjee, as always, a pleasure. Thank you very much. We will check in with you post the budget speech to see what it has delivered on. Sonia, Lata, Prashant, back to you.
All right, Shireen, that's a pretty long wish list, right? And getting only longer by the minute. But I take it that there's lots to watch out for. The three